Hey hooligans, it's Sam. Let's talk about Nazis. Who are they and why are they so awful? Often Nazis are actually your neighbors. You may have noticed lately that Nazis really hate being called Nazis, almost as much as they hate Jews. I don't blame them. Nobody likes being called an asshole either, but nobody's claiming that assholes are some kind of mythical creature. You get that from these alt-right people. You gotta watch out for those fascist social justice warriors. But there's no such thing as Nazis, just people you disagree with. I think the word you're looking for is vampires. There's no such thing as vampires. That's the one. So if Nazis don't really exist, where does the word come from? Originally it meant a clumsy, stupid peasant. It was the German word for redneck. That's why it was later applied to Hitler's National Socialist German Workers' Party. The idea that Nazis are fictional isn't new. Even in Nazi Germany, Nazis insisted they were mythological. They had a popular saying, "There are no real Nazis, just good Germans." That's the real problem, though, isn't it? So it was largely just good Germans that led to the Third Reich. The reality is a fascist regime needs public support. So no democracy elects a fascist on a platform of overt villainy. "If elected, I promise to round up all your Jewish neighbors, stuff them into the oven, and see how they scream. I am Adolf Hitler, and I approve this message." Fascism only comes into being gradually. Hitler's platform began like urban development. "We're just going to move the Jews out of your neighborhood into their own neighborhoods. You know, ghettos. It'll be fun." In time, ghettos became deportation, deportation became work camps, and then work camps became the Holocaust. That's why I'm worried about good Americans, who can see what ICE is doing, but don't want to speak out. And it's not just me. Germans who lived through World War II are worried about our president's rhetoric. Martin Luther King, in his letter from an Alabama jail, talked about the big stumbling block for civil rights not being the Klan, but white moderates who just didn't want to talk about segregation. Mark Twain called silence from newspapers about slavery the lie of silent assertion, that there wasn't anything going on in which humane and intelligent people were interested. So what can we do about invisible Nazis? After World War II, some scientists began studying fascism and found that the primary ingredient was authoritarianism. That's when a person places order, power, and authority above moral values. For example, an authoritarian might say, "Well, if the president says he deserves execution, he must be right. That's just strong leadership. Why else would he be president?" That's not new either. Authoritarian beliefs date back at least to the ancient Greeks, probably before. But the ancient Greeks believed that if you were beautiful or strong, it must be because the gods liked you, and therefore you were good. This led to one famous case in which a jury acquitted a prostitute because she showed them her breasts and asked why the gods would give them to her if she were a bad person. "If the tits are legit, you must acquit." It may surprise you to know that the United States wouldn't exist at all if the Founding Fathers had been authoritarians. Because as far as they're concerned, the law can never be unjust because it's the law. "Well, King George isn't giving us any autonomy. He's taxing us without any representation in Parliament. He's cut off our trade to the entire world. He's denying us trials by jury. He's gang pressing us into the Navy. He's plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. That's strong leadership. Long live the king." Authoritarians ultimately want conformity over everything else, but they can't say that publicly, so instead they say law and order. Anytime the culture begins to change, they freak out. The Supreme Court upheld gay marriage? freak out about wedding cakes. I think knowing this helps. Something else you may have heard a lot lately, the idea that identity politics are bad because asking people to examine their privilege makes them more tribal. The theory goes that confronting them this way makes them more racist and leads them to join Nazi groups. It's bullshit. People call me a social justice warrior. I don't respond by saying, "Oh yeah? Just for that I'm gonna steal everyone's guns and melt them down to make a public domain statue of Karl Marx." If people are racist, they're racist. They can, however, still read the room and decide if they want a dog whistle or let everyone know they're a racist. Calling them on a dog whistle doesn't make them more racist. It only makes them less covert. I'll take overt racism over ninja racism any day. I know I'm not supposed to say ninja. Okay, Asian assassin racist. The point is, stealth racists are invisible precisely because the rest of us aren't consistently calling them out. We're being good Americans. Don't say anything too confrontational. You don't want to make them more tribal. I think it's better to confront racism, especially when it's covert. And you might ask why. Why confront people when they say things like America first, black on black crime, or it's wrong for NFL players to kneel because they're disrespecting our anthem? That anthem? The irony is, it's for a country that enshrined protest in its constitution to prevent fascism. So why confront them? For two reasons, and they're related. First, because the number of killings and terrorist attacks by white supremacists have increased in recent years. White supremacists accounted for 3/4 of terrorist killings in 2017. By comparison, the number committed by Antifa or other leftists have remained pretty low, at about 2%. Meanwhile, the current administration in Washington has pulled back investigations into domestic extremists to focus instead on radical Islamic terrorism. The second reason to confront stealth racism is because movement of the Overton Window contributes to the rise in violence and erosion of civil rights. The Overton Window is a loose description of what ideas are acceptable to express in public, or political correctness. Ironically, it's now politically incorrect in many circles to suggest that political correctness is a good thing, which perfectly demonstrates the Overton Window. People might disagree on ideas within the window, but they'll politely agree to disagree. Ideas outside the window are what's called fringe. Those ideas will get you criticized or ridiculed in public. We can move the window in any given direction, toward any fringe idea we want to make publicly acceptable. Some people call moving the window to a new idea mainstreaming the idea. That's exactly what trashing political correctness is about. Sometimes it's a good thing, like when it was used to give women the vote or to allow gay people to exist. Other times it's used to allow horrible atrocities, like when the Nazis used it to gradually make the Holocaust acceptable. After the American Civil War, overt racism was still very much inside the window. That spawned a terrorist organization known as the Ku Klux Klan, or KKK. By keeping the Overton Window in place, they kept murdering black people with zero consequences well into the 1960s, as long as it was a group activity they called lynching. What's the harm in murdering black people? As long as it happens at the company picnic, it's a team-building exercise. It was only 50 years ago that the Civil Rights Act of 1968 finally outlawed housing discrimination known as redlining. And the year after that, Supreme Court case Loving v. Virginia made interracial marriage legal throughout the U.S. Prior to that court case, Virginia was for lynchers. Good Americans not calling out their coworkers for covert racism is how banks are still redlining 50 years after that Civil Rights Act in 2018.
A stunning new investigation by Reveal and the Center for Investigative Reporting has uncovered evidence that African Americans and Latinos continue to be routinely denied conventional mortgage loans, even at rates far higher than their white counterparts across the country. According to the piece, the home ownership gap between whites and African Americans is now wider than it was during the Jim Crow era. Reveal based its report on a review of 31 million mortgage records filed with the federal government in 2015 and 2016. The investigation found the redlining occurring across the country, including in Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and San Antonio, Texas.
In the past couple of years, unfortunately, statements like Mexicans are murderers and rapists or MS-13 have moved the Overton window back in the direction of overt racism. Thankfully, Michael Williams lost the Republican primary for governor of Virginia, but it never should have been acceptable for him to air this campaign ad in the first place.
Hi, I'm Michael Williams, and boy, do we have some exciting news for you. We have our bus tour ready to go, but it's not going to be one of those pansy political bus tours. We've got the deportation bus. If you're as tired as I am with politicians that do nothing but talk, and you want to see this bus filled with illegals, vote Michael Williams.
It also shouldn't be acceptable to say white genocide in public.
Being a dreadful, awful, ghastly racist such as myself does tend to give me an advantage because it means I can actually talk about race. And we do need to talk about race because the 21st century, unless things change, will see the virtual extinction of my white European race.
For the first time ever, the number of people who class themselves as white British is now a minority in London. The 2011 census results out today show 45% of Londoners are now white British.
In Europe, we have a big problem because we are demographically declining as a race. 1.5 children means that tomorrow's generation is 25% smaller than today's. And I believe this is the greatest racial crime that has ever been committed in the history of mankind.
Those people have more sex than me. Genocide! The problem is that kind of bullshit makes other kinds of overt racism more acceptable by making it seem tame by comparison. Okay, so you're not saying it's genocide for them to fuck more than you. You just want the wall and deportations to stop immigration because you think they're murderers? Fair enough, I'll take that compromise. That's not compromise. If you say refugees need help and they say let's shoot them at the border, it's not compromise to say fine, kick them out. That's a hostage situation. Allowing stealth racism in public without calling it out is what leads to overt racism being acceptable, and likely the rise in white supremacist terrorist attacks. In Germany in the 1930s, good Germans not calling it out led to mass deportation. Deportation became work camps, and then camps became the Holocaust. In the US today, we're already on step 2, mass deportations. I think there's still time to move the window back before we reach the work camps in step 3. To do that, we have to call out the stealth Nazis and stop letting them say that fucking is a weapon of genocide. Thanks for having this chat with me. I'm Sam, and I'll catch you all next time.
Why you don't like me? Give me a hug. Give me a hug. Give me a hug. Give me a hug. Yeah, give me a hug. You don't like me? Hug me.
President Kennedy's favorite quote was really from Dante, that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in time of moral crisis preserve their neutrality. I think that for all of us, that we have an obligation We have a responsibility. If we don't do it, then nobody's going to do it. We have a special, not only responsibility, but a special opportunity to make a difference in the world and make a difference for this country. And that's really what I come to say to you. I think of what Archimedes said, and perhaps it's a little explaining the lever. And he said, show me where I can stand and I can move the world. And I think that we can. I don't think it's just a question of political belief, but I think that we can make a difference. And so, thank you.